Hello and welcome to Franchise Me. I am Ryan.
And I'm Andrew.
And this is the show where two friends go on a journey to find the ultimate movie franchise. Each week we will talk about a film or films in a series, breaking them down and seeing if they are truly worthy of being in a franchise. As we finish different series, we will compare and rank them among each other in order to find out which one is truly the best. This week we will continue down the road of the Fast and Furious, and we'll be talking about Too Fast, Too Furious.
I like how you said down the road. I didn't know you were going to say that.
So yeah, we're talking about Too Fast, Too Furious. The release date of this is June 6, 2003. It is directed by John Singleton. You may know him as the Academy Award nominated director for Boys in the Hood.
Yes.
It is screenplay by Michael Brandt and Derek Haas. And it is starring Paul Walker as Brian O'Connor, Tyrese Gibson as Roman Pierce, Eva Mendes as Monica Fuentes, Cole Hauser as Carter Verone, Chris Ludacris Bridges as Tej Parker, James Remar as Agent Markham, and Tom Barry as Agent Bilkins. So we see here that Paul Walker and Tom Barry are the only actors to return to this movie from the first one.
Yes. I didn't know Tom Barry was coming back. I'm looking at him and I thought to myself, Tom Barry's back. The LAPD captain is in Miami?
No, he's the FBI agent.
He's the FBI agent.
Yes.
Okay. I thought he was part of the LAPD. So
no, the other guy was the captain.
Gotcha.
This is the FBI agent.
He's the FBI agent. Yeah. I was very surprised to see him again. I'm glad he was, though. I'm actually glad he was, because I like his character.
I think it helps connect this to the first one a little bit.
Yeah.
Although it seems like, and we'll talk about this later, that they don't want to connect this to the first one.
Yeah. And then obviously Paul Walker's back, which is good. Continuing this thing of Paul Walker's going to be the star of this franchise.
Yeah. Obviously, as we go into Tokyo Drift next week, they kind of do like a soft reboot in this franchise. Vin Diesel's in a cameo. Paul Walker's not back. Yeah. There's no returning characters in this series for that movie. Mostly, I guess they wanted to hit kind of like a reset button, and we'll talk all about that next week. But I think he does carry the leading role into the other movies, but because Vin Diesel is now a much bigger star than he was, they both were kind of unknown or unproven talents in the first movie.
Right.
And they lean on Paul Walker for this movie, but as they go into like 4, when they come back, I think that's pretty split. I think up until Paul Walker's death, I think it's pretty split.
Yeah, there's a co-lead there.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think works better in the long run. But when you watch it from this perspective of Paul Walker and the introduction of Tyrese Gibson's character, Roman Pierce. What a name, by the way. What a great movie name. I was like, Roman Pierce. That's a great name.
We have basically an all-new cast besides Paul Walker and Tom Barry. What'd you think of this new cast?
It was better than I thought it was going to be. I will say that. It's better than I thought it was going to be. You're kind of led to believe at the very beginning of this that the race they do in the beginning, at the very beginning of this movie, there's the race and they kind of introduced 3 other racers along with Paul Walker. And you're kind of led to believe like, oh, is this going to be like the new crew for this movie?
Yep.
Are these people going to help him with this heist later on and be like an integral part of the movie? In the long run, that's not exactly the case. They come back, but I wouldn't say by any means they are integral to this movie.
Yep.
So it's interesting to kind of see that in that aspect.
The one of them who has the most use or is used the most is Suki.
Suki is used the most, and the other 2
disappear for the entire movie.
Disappear for the entire movie. They don't come back till a scene later on, and it's really Suki who's used more. We are also introduced to Ludacris right at the beginning there. Afro, big afro.
Threw me off.
Yeah.
Definitely threw me off.
I was like, is that Luda? And I went, oh, it's Luda. And I was just like, that's great. And he's great. He's really, really good in his role. I liked him a lot in the role, actually. I really liked him in the role. He's very energetic, but he also like energetic in the way that he brings a certain coolness to the movie. And I like that he's a promotional guy. And they keep referencing, oh, he's a really good driver. Like, he can really drive. But he just doesn't want to do it anymore. Like, he just wants to make his money.
He got injured or whatever.
He got injured, and he just wants to make his money and do promotional things. And I like that character. Moving to Tyrese Gibson, great addition. Great addition.
Yep.
If we're going to say what the best relationship is in this movie, it really is Paul Walker and Tyrese Gibson's character. Those guys, they carry this movie together. in a really unique way. It's different from the first movie in that sense, because Paul Walker and Vin Diesel, you're seeing them.
Well, they're meeting,
and you're seeing a relationship grow. But this one is this movie. It's an established relationship. They grew up together. They do this thing. They are together. He's a great driver. That's what that Paul Walker picks him, because he's like, oh, Roman's a great driver. We need to get him.
I only want to do this if I can pick my partner, and I wanted to be this guy.
And I wanted to be this guy. And he's a great addition to this movie. He's a great character. They have great chemistry throughout the movie, and they really carry it, I think.
I love he's always eating. Like he's
always eating.
When he goes into the FBI agent or whatever, the U.S. Customs agent, and he just opens the sandwich, and because that's mine, is so what?
Like, so what? I'm eating it. Yeah, it's fantastic. It is a wonderful kind of, I don't know if redemption is the right word, but it kind of is a redemption story for Roman Pierce in a way. You know, we're introduced to this character at like a demolition rally, just running into other cars. He's under house arrest. He had just gone out. He spent 3 years in prison, and then at the very end, he does this job, and his record's wiped clean, and he's no longer under house arrest, and he gives some of the money back. Some of it. He gives some of the money back, which is good.
He's a very interesting character, and I love that they brought him back, and that he does continue to grow. Here he is the most serious, because we'll see that from understand that he becomes such a comedic character. Like he is only kind of there to be the butt of the joke, or to deliver like the crazy, we're gonna drive this car out of a plane type of thing. Like,
that's the thing I remember from the later movies, especially from Fast 5. He's always yelling in the car when something crazy's going. Yeah,
he's kind of doing like the Kevin Hart shtick, kind of. Like he's always like, we're doing this, we're doing that. I can't believe it.
And Vin Diesel's kind of his rock.
Yeah. It is interesting that we see him, we get this backstory. I didn't know this backstory. I didn't know. And he plays it really well. And he is absolutely a standout in this movie. And I think also, we talked about Paul Walker a little bit, and we talked about last week about how Paul Walker seemed a little uncomfortable in the role.
Yes.
Seemed like he wasn't really confident.
Yes.
I think that he feels like a movie star here. He does carry this movie. And, he is in, like you mentioned last week, just about almost every single scene.
Absolutely.
And he does a great job. It's not Shakespeare by any means, but he is confident. And I think he definitely, he feels more comfortable in the role than I think that he did before.
I completely agree with that. He grew a lot for me.
Absolutely.
Which was surprising considering the first one is 2001 and this is 2003.
Yeah.
I mean, he moved right into this movie. I don't think there was a movie in between. I literally think it was Fast and the Furious, and then he moved right into Too Fast, Too Furious. And the growth between those movies is insane, because he is much better in this one. I enjoyed his performance much better. He seemed more relaxed. He seemed more confident, like you're saying. He didn't seem nervous or anxious anymore.
Yeah.
Like the first movie, I kind of was picking up on that. Like I was watching it and I was thinking to myself, I was like, oh, he seems kind of nervous when I'm watching. Like, he doesn't seem fully confident that he is the lead of this movie. And in this movie, he just takes the reins and runs with it.
I think one of the things that helps him in these movies is that he does have a background with, I was looking him up, he has a background with cars. Like, he personally loves cars. I mean, again, obviously, unfortunately, his passing was due to
a car crash.
Yeah. And he, like this, it's almost funny that he became synonymous with this franchise, because apparently he's always had that interest, which is really interesting. And I think that does help. I think when he's delivering lines like to the mechanic and stuff like that,
does it have this part, that part?
He seems like he understands what he's saying, and you can tell, especially like in like medical shows, when somebody has to give medical jargon, they're not confident sometimes in what they're saying, and you can tell. And I don't know anything about cars, so he could say whatever, and I probably would believe him. But he does sound like he's believable. He sounds like he's confident. I think that helps.
Yeah, he sounds very confident when he delivers the stuff about cars. Because I was aware that he did have a little bit of background with cars, and not even a little. I mean, obviously a lot. He knows cars. So it's really cool to hear him deliver those lines and say those things, because he sounds like he knows what the hell he's talking about. He's like, oh, why doesn't it have this? Why doesn't it have that? Why doesn't it, I don't know any of the parts, but he goes, why doesn't it have this and that? And you're
can you do this to that? Can you do this?
Can you do this? Can you hook this up to that? And you're just like, oh yeah, like I totally buy that he knows exactly what he's talking about.
Yeah.
It's interesting, too, that they gave Paul Walker all those lines to say, because I get the sense that Tyrese Gibson isn't as good with cars.
In real life, maybe not. I don't know. I haven't looked into Tyrese yet.
He doesn't say a lot of car jargon in this movie. Like, for being a good driver,
and I think
there's not a lot of car jargon from his character.
I think even his character isn't supposed to be an expert at cars. Like,
He can just
he's
drive
a driver, and he's,
Right.
But he's not, like, he's almost like a wheelman or whatever, but he's not
Right.
necessarily a mechanic. You know what I
Right.
mean? Like, Paul Walker has a background with cars. I mean, Vin Diesel's character, Dom, has a background with cars. Ludacris's character is obviously a mechanic in these movies.
Right.
That it will be interesting to watch because he goes from being a mechanic to an all-out hacker. Like, just because he can fix cars,
he makes a jump.
he's hacking into, like, the FBI in later movies.
Yeah. They're like, oh, you can fix a muffler? You could probably hack into the FBI then, right? That's a skill. You can do that.
It's funny to see the origin of these characters. And, again, these two characters, when Tej Parker and Roman Pierce meet, and he kind of, like, Ludacris kind of gives, like, he's not even paying attention. He gives him a loose fist bump type of thing.
Right.
It's interesting because they get paired up. Starting in 5, they get paired up, and they are like the comedy duo.
Yes.
And they play off each other really well, and it's funny to see this origin. And they really don't build that into here. Like, that's not really here. You know, like, they interact a little bit, they crack a couple jokes, but they really don't interact that much.
Right.
So it's
not
funny
a lot.
that I guess they just decided that later on, maybe the chemistry was so well, or maybe they enjoyed each other. Maybe Tyrese Gibson and Ludacris enjoyed each other so well that they just decided to pair them up.
Run with it. Right. And
but
say, let's do it.
yeah, it's just funny to see how that all begins. So, and then obviously we do have Eva Mendes here as Monica Fuentes.
Yeah.
What did you think of her?
I don't think she had enough to do.
No.
That's what I'm going to say straight up. I kind of felt bad when I was watching this. I thought her role was going to be bigger, I suppose, and more of a integral role in this movie, and they really don't give her a lot to do. We were introduced to her at the race at the very beginning, and she's like staring at Paul Walker, and you think, oh, there's the love interest for the movie. But even that is kind of weird. Even the love interest thing is kind of weird. Like, it doesn't really build up to that, and
It doesn't really
it
pay
doesn't
off.
go anywhere. It
Yeah.
doesn't go anywhere, and it's kind of that whole thing is a little odd to me. But as far as her character, like, I enjoy that they introduce her as the agent. I kind of knew that's where it was going to go to when they said, "Oh, I have an undercover person." I went, "Oh, it's Eva Mendes, obviously." And then when they opened the truck and there she is in the back, I went, "Oh, of course, makes sense." So it was cool seeing that aspect, and it looks like she has a lot to do in the beginning, and then suddenly it just falls off. And suddenly she's in scenes where she doesn't even say anything. Like, she has no lines, and she's just, like, standing there and is told, I guess, hey, look scared. And that's all she's told to do, which is really upsetting because you want it to be more than that. You really want it to be more than that.
It's interesting because you compare it to the first movie where you had two
female leads.
There's two female lead characters in the
Yes.
first movie, and here you kind of just have two female characters in general. You have Eva Mendes, who's clearly a lead, but then you got Suki, who really doesn't do anything. She's
doesn't do
just kind of
anything.
there.
Yeah.
Eva Mendes, and she's fine for what she does. She's not bad in the movie, but she
Right.
doesn't have much to do. But you look at the first one, and Letty, again, we talked about last week that she didn't have super much to do, but with the little bit that she did, she really dominated her screen time.
Yes.
You feel her presence.
Great character.
And Jordana Brewster does a great job with
Yes.
her character of, being kind of the anchor of, this romance story, and,
Yes.
and that Mia Bryan love story does become kind of the heart of this franchise.
Right.
And goes on to mean even more that Paul Walker's not alive anymore.
Yes.
They don't have time to do like is Brian going to betray me or cheat on me? Like, not that they ever would, but you don't have anything like that.
Yeah.
That they can really rely on unless
Right.
they were to bring Brian back. But
Yeah.
I hope not.
And even what I got out of this movie as far as the romance between him and Eva Mendes in this character was more. It seemed more like a fling to me than anything. It didn't even seem like a romance.
Well, she kisses
kiss
him once, right? Yeah.
Like once in the entire movie, and then the very end, there's not even a payoff to it.
No,
because
she
she
just like,
shows
"Okay,
up and
thank
she's
you."
like, she's like, "Hey, we beat we did it. The mission's complete. All right, awesome." And then they just go their separate ways,
Yep.
and you're kind of like, "Oh, I guess there's no romance here." So it didn't go the direction I thought it was going to go. She does what she can with what she has. That's what I'll say. And it's upsetting because I think especially coming off the first movie where you had two great female leads and like great characters, to kind of to subtract that from this movie and kind of take the female character and lower the role a little bit and make it not as interesting was upsetting, especially with like a talent like Eva Mendes. I mean, I know she was like early in her career in a way. To be honest, it should have been a bigger role, you know? It really should have.
Mm-hmm. And they try to play up the whole, is she with Verone? Is she not with Verone?
Right.
Did she give in? Is she,
right.
Is she evil? Is she good? Type of thing. And I don't think there's ever really a doubt that she's gonna be good. Like, I know, like, they try to have Tyrese, they try to have Roman, egg on. Oh, I think she's gone. She's sleeping with the enemy.
Right.
There's no way she's not in his pockets. There's no way, whatever. They're trying to build tension that way. It doesn't really work. I don't ever really buy into that she's with him.
Yeah.
Especially because I know that she's still a cop in 5.
Right. Right. Yeah, so that's a little upsetting. But it's a good character. It works. Let's talk about the villain quickly, too.
Absolutely.
I want to hear your thoughts on this villain.
Cole Hauser as Carter Verone. I'm not familiar with this actor.
Right.
This is really interesting.
Yeah.
And I wonder with this character is if Paul Walker had never passed away, if they would ever bring him back. I don't think they would work now.
Yes.
Because he only has the connection to Roman, and Roman's not big enough of a character to, like, oh my God, they're attacking us because Roman betrayed this guy once.
Yeah.
But, and he says, like, I will be back, I will get out, and I will kill you.
Right. And they really play it up. And it almost seemed like if they didn't do Tokyo Drift, this guy would have come back for Fast and Furious 3.
Yeah, like they were kind of maybe dropping the hints that if he was a standout or people really dug his villain role, then maybe he'll come back. He's over the top.
He's very over the top.
He's over the top.
Man.
There's one specific scene that we'll talk about later in which he's over the top.
He's a little over the top. This was probably the closest. I kind of got it was very reminiscent of just like an 80s villain to me.
Yeah.
Very over the top, just like pure evil. There's no redemptive qualities in this guy.
He felt like he came from an episode of Miami Vice or something. Like,
and there's no, he's a complete caricature of an 80s villain. There's no redemptive qualities. He's evil just for the sake of being evil. That's his whole thing.
And he's kind of all over the place.
Yes.
Yeah,
I didn't love I didn't love the villain in this movie. That's what I'll say. I didn't love.
Would you want to see him return? Like,
at this point, no. I think he's just too. I think because Too Fast, Too Furious is a little bit maybe forgotten now. Like, I don't think they want to revisit that movie anytime soon.
I don't know, because if they're connecting Tokyo Drift so much, I think anything is touchable in this.
I do too, but I think the only reason they're doing Tokyo Drift is because they really wanted to bring Han back. That's what they wanted. They wanted him because he was the standout, and they said, we need to get this guy back. And I think maybe that was the impetus for that, where they were like, let's get the standout guy back. And I know that the main Tokyo Drift guy also comes back too.
Lucas Black. Yeah.
Lucas Black.
And Bow Wow.
As we spoke, the white guy in Tokyo, freaking let's do a movie in Tokyo, but let's not get a Japanese lead. Let's do that. How cool would that be? It's not cool, but it's I think they just really wanted to connect those movies, because I think also we'll talk about more next week, but I think Tokyo Drift has a bit more of a cult status than Too Fast, Too Furious does, and I think maybe that's why they touched on that more than Too Fast, Too Furious.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it makes sense. How about maybe as we're leading to this 2-part finale, we talked about 10 and 11. I looked into it. It will be, they are considering it like a 2-part connective finale. So it is 10 and 11.
Is it going to be called 11? I just saw... I saw Fast 10 Part 1 and Fast 10 Part 2.
But, it's still 11 either way. I think they're going to call it 11.
I'm not going to buy it yet.
But, so they're building into this. I would not be... Well, I don't know where this actor is. I don't even know if he's alive, to be honest. But I wouldn't be surprised if they did something where, like, they put together a super team and everybody, or the villains put together a super team and everybody who is a villain or has been wronged by this crew comes together and works with, I believe, Charlize Theron.
Right.
Again, we have not seen 9. I don't know what happens in 9. I don't know if she... Again, I don't know if her character's alive or dead or whatever. I don't know.
Right.
But if she's still there, maybe she puts together a team and maybe she gets him and he's there briefly.
Sure.
But
we don't know. You know what I mean?
No.
Maybe these characters will come back in part 1 or part 2. But it is curious that they end Too Fast, Too Furious with this villain so intently saying, I'll be back. And then he's never brought back again. But again, I think the reason is just because maybe they don't want to touch on Too Fast, Too Furious as much as they want to pull from Tokyo Drift.
And I think, like I said, that maybe they were setting up a possible sequel. Like, hey, we'll say he wants to come back. And if we never bring him back, that's just something bad guys say. And if he does come back, we do another one of these, and we do want to go in this direction, we can bring him back.
Yes, absolutely.
So the budget of this movie, $76 million budget. And the box office was $236.4 million.
People are still going to see it. Yeah, people still want to
still
see it.
successful.
I mean, even if people say, critically, I know critically this movie wasn't well received, and I know audience wise, like just from my views and your views, I'm sure you look too, just on Letterboxd alone, it's definitely on the lower scale of ratings compared to the other movies. So but regardless of that, I mean, 236, that's a success.
Yes.
That's a success.
The first film had a budget of $38 million. So
they
this
did
seemed
jump
like
it.
almost $50 million budget jump. Yeah.
Yeah, they jumped it up.
And in some sequences you can tell, and in some sequences you can't. And again, we'll talk about that a little bit later. Yeah. I do have, and I want to include this, the Rotten Tomatoes score.
Yes, please.
For this movie. And I have the last one because I didn't put it in the last one. So for the Rotten Tomatoes score for this movie, the critics score is 36%, so it's rotten.
Of course.
And the audience is a 50% rotten score.
Still rotten. Low. Yeah, still pretty low.
Because you'll see with a lot of these movies that even the ones that are rotten by the critics are pretty beloved by the fans.
I know later on, especially with Fast 5, 6, like
those are all
critically
fresh.
Accepted. Yeah. Okay, cool.
I believe it's actually every Fast and Furious movie that is fresh by a critic has The Rock in it. And if it doesn't have The Rock in it, it's not
good.
fresh.
Right.
So
what is what's the first one?
So it has a critic score of 54%.
Okay.
So it's still rotten. But it has a audience score of 74%. So
audience responded more to the first one than they did with this one.
Yeah, this one they're not loving this one.
Any way you can look, any way you look at it, I know we're trying. We like this movie to a degree. I didn't, but it's interesting to look at that.
I think that from what we understand, and like what you said you see on Letterboxd, I think that accurately depicts.
Oh yeah.
How the audience feels about it. Some people embrace the goofiness of this movie, and some people aren't into it. People struggle with it a little bit.
I mean, I certainly did myself. A tad.
Before we get into that, let's talk about the story. So let's talk about the synopsis of this movie. After the events in L.A., Brian O'Connor is no longer a cop and is residing in Miami as an illegal street racer along with the help of local mechanic Tej Parker.
Yes.
Brian is recruited by the FBI to help take down drug lord Carter Verone.
Yes.
In order to do so, Brian seeks help from his childhood friend Roman Pierce, an ex-con on house arrest who blames Brian for his misfortune. In exchange for their help, O'Connor and Pierce will achieve immunity for their past crimes. The two friends are partnered with U.S. Customs Agent Monica Fuentes, who is currently undercover as Verone's aide and lover.
Ooh.
Brian and Roman must learn to work together while also trying to decide if they really can trust Fuentes.
Sure.
What did you think of this story?
For me, this is kind of the weakest part of this entire film. The story's not that interesting. This dragged more for me than it did the first one. I felt like the first one, I think we talked about this last week, but the first one felt very grounded, but it also felt very based in reality about the story it was telling. You could tell that this could happen. This is like there's a lot of street culture. And
Dom felt like a real character.
Yes.
He was the anchor to the first film. He portrayed the character in such a kind of a grounded way, which is interesting because he becomes so unrealistic and so crazy
Yes,
later on,
yes.
and him probably more than anybody else.
Yes.
But in the first one, we both agreed that he really does feel stoic and serious, and Vin Diesel did
Yes.
such a great job of portraying that.
Yes.
And which is what this movie, I think, is missing. That's that's what is missing from this film.
The argument can be made that because maybe these characters from the first film don't come back, that maybe this film took a hit because of that. And I think that was a big thing for me, because I will tell you, when I was watching this, again, as great as it was to have the introduction of Tyrese Gibson and Ludacris to the series, I missed Vin Diesel. I missed Michelle Rodriguez. I missed Jordana Brewster. I missed those characters.
What about Vince?
Vince. I'm not going to talk on Vince. I made my feelings clear last week. But no, I missed those characters. And I think that this movie took a hit because of that.
Yeah.
And it's a completely different city. I mean, he's on the East Coast now in this
Yeah.
movie. I mean, he goes to Miami. It's a different setting. It's not the LA. It's not the LA street culture that we were introduced in the first one. It's more the Miami street culture this time around. But it also feels like there's a lot more excess in this movie as far as what is going on to me. Like I don't know what way exactly.
It's a little bit more gratuitous.
It's a little more gratuitous.
The women are objectified a little bit more.
Yes.
I saw this on Letterboxd. I tried to find this quote in the movie. I didn't, but I saw this on Letterboxd. I believe the term Hoasis is thrown around in this movie at some
Oasis
point.
is thrown around. The word bro is thrown around a lot. Did you notice that?
Oh, yes, you know what I did?
I felt like every time Tyrese Gibson and Paul Walker were talking to each other, they were saying bro. Bruh, bro, bro, bro. I think at one point, too, Paul Walker says cuh for like cuh.
Yes.
He goes, relax, cuh. And I'm
Yeah.
like, what? I couldn't believe what I was watching. I was like, this is unbelievable. I didn't like that. So to me, the dialogue was lacking as
Then
well
there's
a little bit. And
The other racer that's like a 50s like greaser?
what was that? What was that? The guys in the American muscle cars, and they get in the car and they have to race to steal their cars later on. To win their cars, because they were like, oh, we need 2 more cars for this job we're going to do. So they're racing against these guys. And these like 50s, what looks to be Italian mob greasers come
And
out
they
and they're like,
look really pretty old. Like,
They look
they're in their
old.
50s.
They look like they're in their 50s.
But they
and
look
they're
like they're from the 50s, in their 50s. Like, they call him Fonzie and stuff like that.
they're like, oh, Fonzie, and you're like looking at them, and I'm like watching this, and I'm like, everyone else in this movie is a young racer. They're young. They're like, they look like they're like in their 20s, maybe like early, like 20s, 30s, and they look young racers. And then you get to these guys, and it's like these late 50s racers, and they're just like, hey, you want to race us? And you're just like, what is going on here?
Say what you want about, and we talk about the culture and say what you want about all that, but like everybody feels relatively like they fit, right?
Yes.
And I don't know what Miami was like, especially in
Those two don't
2003.
fit.
But those two, where are they from?
They felt like they were from New York, right? Like they came down. Like it looked. I genuinely was like, are these like New York mafioso guys that are just in Miami with muscle cars and driving? Like
They look like they got rejected off of Goodfellas, and they're like, hey.
like Scorsese. Oh man, that's funny. Years ago, Scorsese denied them. And they were just like, we're gonna be mobsters in a movie. I'm telling you. And here they are. They did it. So I thought that was really strange. As far as the story even goes, to be quite honest, it's just not that interesting. It's not an interest. It didn't pull me in like the first one did, where I felt like I was in this world and I was being pulled in, and I ended up liking it a lot more than I thought. This one, I just was really I didn't find it interesting. I thought it was over the top. I thought there were a lot of scenes that were probably unnecessary. Like it felt like they were trying to fill time. And I know that like the anchor is Paul Walker and Tyrese Gibson's character's relationship and how they grow. Like that part of the movie is good to me, like them creating a relationship again and learning to be friends again. But a lot of what's going on around them is just so uninteresting to me. And that was my struggle.
So let's tie this into our opinions. So you kind of talked about it. So how do you overall feel about this movie? Good time, bad time?
I think for me, I wouldn't say it was a bad time. I would say it was more decent or indifferent. I could take or leave this movie, quite honestly.
So
I don't think this is one that I would be like anxious to revisit.
Pretty middle of the road.
Pretty middle of the road.
Yeah.
I don't I certainly don't love it, but I don't hate it either. It's not the worst movie I've ever seen, but it's certainly not one of my. I think when this is all said and done, this is probably going to be my least favorite Fast and Furious movie for sure.
And I think I'm a little bit easier on this movie than you because I had a really good time with this movie, and because I was expecting this to be
so bad.
Last week you kind of compared the Fast and Furious movies to the Mission Impossible series, and the Mission Impossible 2 is one of my least favorite movies I think I've ever seen.
Oh God, it's so bad.
It is a drag to get through. It's horrible. The action sequences are boring. The dialogue is stupid. The characters are useless. I hated Mission Impossible 2. Yeah. And I went into this movie expecting Mission Impossible 2.
Yes.
And I didn't get that. And
when you set that standard, it does make it an easier watch.
And that's not an excuse for this movie. I don't know. I just had fun. It's definitely not the first one. The first one is a much better movie. It's a much cleaner movie. It fits more. It stands alone more. This one, it's a fun time.
Yes.
Okay, and this one is a fun watch for me because I expected it to take itself too seriously. Mm-hmm. I expected this to try to be like the first one.
Sure.
And this story doesn't fit that.
Yeah.
And I don't think that it does try to be the first one. I think it does try to kind of do its own thing.
It does.
And it does embrace the silliness a little bit more and the goofiness a little bit more.
Yeah.
Not as well as the later movies do, because when we talk about this, these movies get so over the top and so ridiculous.
Yeah.
But it embraces that and it recognizes, it's in on the joke.
Yes.
Or a lot of them feel like it's in on the joke. And this one didn't feel like it fully embraced that, but it wasn't trying to be such a grounded movie like the first one. If they tried to do that, that would have been so boring. And for that, I was able to have a good time with this.
Sure.
And I laughed at all the jokes and Tyrese and Ludacris, and I had a good time. So
it's a fun movie. I'm not saying it's not fun at all. I do think it is a fun movie. And I don't know. I think for me, I do watch these movies, and I know they're meant to be over the top. I know they're meant to be crazy, but there's usually a pretty solid story holding it all together. And that's kind of just what I struggled with the most, where I did find it goofy and I did find it funny and I enjoyed aspects of this movie, but there just didn't feel like a story to keep the glue together. But I do want to speak on what you were just saying, how they embrace kind of the craziness a little bit more. I actually think this is the movie where they started to experiment with doing crazy stunts and absurd stunts.
Yes.
I mean, the beginning race with the bridge going up and then Paul, the one car
he
goes,
jumps
and he goes over top of it, and I'm watching that and I was like, that was entertaining. I enjoyed that, and I wasn't expecting it, and I thought, okay, so they're kind of starting to embrace it, and that's one scene that sticks out. And then the other one that sticks out to me is him when they're at the very end of the movie, they drive the car onto the boat. And I was like, okay, this is kind of like the dawn of them doing this really crazy stuff, because they don't really do that in the first one. This is the first movie where they start to kind of play with the absurd a little bit.
And I think this has the better race sequences. This has the better driving sequences.
I liked the opening race. I will say that.
And because when we talked about the race sequence in the first one it's just them sitting in a car, kind of clearly on green screen,
just going like this.
Yeah, and it's really not much to it. And this is a little bit more. This was a little bit more into it, and it was more entertaining for me. The race wise, it doesn't have a major. I liked the action sequence with the truck in the first one,
right?
Because we talked about it felt more grounded. It was that brought an intensity to it, because it did feel a little bit more realistic.
Yes, as
ridiculous as harpooning a 16-wheeler truck is.
Yes,
it felt a little bit more grounded than here, and the police are using whatever fictional device that is that's frying.
What was that? They were firing into cars, and the cars would just stall out. And I'm watching that, and I thought, okay, this is starting to get up. And that's what I mean by they were starting to play with the absurd. Because apparently the police had access to a weapon like this that could stall cars out. And looks very dangerous. I just want to put out, it looks very dangerous.
It's funny because while doing research for this movie, the IMDb trivia has it as, the technology used by the police to stall cars do not really exist.
Obviously. I'm watching this and I'm going, this is the second movie, it's 2003, and these guys are firing like these harpoon electrical weapons into the side of the car. I'm like, what if that backfires and the car blows up?
They're like tasing cars,
Yeah, they're like
essentially.
tasing cars and frying them. And I'm just thinking to myself, they still have that gas in the car too. I'm like, what if that didn't react well with the gas and the car blew up? Like, they weren't even thinking about that. They were just firing it into the side of cars. But yeah, no, I agree with you.
That's the one thing I think this has over the first one is that the race sequences specifically are much more entertaining, and the action, like you said, is a little bit more wild, is a little bit more what we kind of expect from these films.
Yes.
I don't know if I would say that it's necessarily a good movie, but I did have a fun time with it. Yes. I gave it, we talked about Letterboxd, I gave it 3 stars.
Yes.
That might change, but I just had fun with it. I enjoyed it a little bit too much to give it a lower rating for me.
Right.
So
I gave it 2.5, which you saw. I gave it 2.5, and we've talked about our ratings before, but 2.5 isn't bad to me.
No,
to me,
2.5 is an okay movie. It's right in the middle of the road.
It's okay. It was a very okay watch. I didn't love it. I didn't hate it. It was a very okay watch, because when you put it, like you said earlier, the standard of Mission Impossible 2. It's a way better movie than that.
I think that
by
helps.
all means, it's a way better movie.
Because everything I've heard about this movie leading up to this made me think that.
Yes, and you think that, yeah, and that's kind of the thing. When I will say, going into this, even though I'm saying this is an okay movie, it's better than what I was expecting. I will say it's much better than I was expecting, because I was going in with the same mindset of you of like, oh my god, this is going to be our Mission Impossible 2 of this franchise.
Yeah.
And it just turns out to be like an okay movie. I could sit through the movie. I wasn't like walking. I wasn't getting frustrated watching it, which is what I felt with the Mission Impossible 2. I wasn't getting frustrated. I could sit through it, even though I got really bored sometimes. I could sit through it, but I wouldn't be excited to watch this one.
No, and if this is the worst movie in the franchise, then we're in pretty good hands.
We're in good hands.
I feel confident about that because it wasn't god awful. And I feel like almost every franchise has
one of them.
One movie that's just the stinker. And
Yeah.
if this is the stinker, I'm good.
Yeah, I'm good too, because and that also, there a lot of credit to the Fast franchise for that, because I mean, I guess you could technically say there are 10 movies if you add Hobbs and Shaw.
Yeah, there are 10 movies into
There's
this.
10 movies into this thing, and their second movie is the one that wasn't great.
Yeah.
And every other one has been fairly well received.
And a lot of the times, the second movie is kind of the weaker,
because they just don't know what to do. They're kind of still figuring it out, and it's interesting to kind of look at it now and think, okay, they're 10 movies into this thing, and their second one is the bad one. I'm okay with that. Yeah. I'm glad we're just going to get better and better and better from here on out, because once we hit Fast 5, we're going to be off and running. But I think we're going to see more. I think we're going to see each one bring a little bit more of that formula that makes Fast 5 work, which I'm excited about.
Yeah, and I mentioned this a little bit last week too, but this is almost like the little franchise that could. Like, It just feels like it wasn't meant to be. And they did not figure out what they wanted to do with this franchise or what they could do with this franchise until like 4 and really 5.
Really was 5.
And kind of like, oh, you know what? We have this cast of characters. We have these good actors.
Well,
let's bring them in and let's make a super team, and to really do that, I think really pays off. And yeah, it loses its footing a little bit in the beginning, but a lot of the franchises do, and they got lucky that they were able to kind of recoup the way they did and make it what it is today.
Yes.
Because otherwise, if it was just 1, I think it would have a good legacy.
Right.
1 and 2, you got a bad taste in your mouth.
Yes. And I think as we start moving through these movies more, and we start going into the ones as they get better and they start figuring out the formula, somebody we're going to have to talk about as we go into this more is Justin Lin, the director.
I'm going to talk about him next week. Yep.
Next week is that's the first one he directs. And he is a big part of why this franchise became what it is.
Even the
he's directed 5 of these movies, and he's going to do 10
the
and
last
11.
2, yeah.
So he is a very, very big part of why these movies are as good as they are, and why it was successful.
And
I think he's going to be an interesting person to talk about.
Maybe an unsung hero too is Chris Morgan, I believe his name is the writer who starts with Justin Lin as well in the next movie, and he comes back for just about I think almost all of them as well.
Yeah, I think there's a few later on. I don't remember which ones I think it's like
it's 6 and 7.
6 and 7, possibly 8.
No, I think Justin Lin did.
Did he come back for 8?
I think Justin Lin did 8.
Okay, so I think you're right then. 6 and 7 that he wasn't there for.
Or maybe maybe we didn't do 8.
It was either 6, 7, and 8 or 6 and 7 where they had different directors, but he came back for 9, and that's what's really awesome. And it's going to be really interesting to kind of see these movies get better, and we're going to have to talk about him because he is. So
Justin Lin misses 7 and 8.
He misses only 7 and 8, which. Yep. I mean,
he starts at 3, goes from 3 to 6.
Yes. Wow.
Misses 7, 8. Obviously, he doesn't do Hobbs and Shaw either, but that's a different thing anyway. And he comes back for 9, and he's going to head up the last 2.
Man.
So
yeah, and so it's going to be really fascinating talking about him and Chris next week, Justin Lin and
Chris Morgan. Chris Morgan did 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
Oh wow.
And 8. So he didn't do 9.
He didn't do 9.
And he did do Hobbs and Shaw.
And he did do Hobbs and Shaw.
The writer did Hobbs and Shaw.
Do we know if he'll be back for the finale?
No, it doesn't look like it.
Okay, interesting. That's very fascinating. Well, regardless, I'm really excited to talk about him next week, though, for sure. But right now, for what I will say is also, I mean, I guess while we're talking about it, we might as well just touch on, since we're talking about directors, just John Singleton doing this movie. Kind of a very well-known director at this point in his career. Like you said, when you started this off, he was Academy Award nominated for Boys in the Hood, which is early 90s. He stayed pretty active through the 90s, and then he gets this big action movie with Too Fast, Too Furious.
And Tyrese comes in because Tyrese worked with him before.
Yeah.
So he brought Tyrese in from that.
He brought Tyrese in from that, and it's really curious to see his take on it, to see John Singleton's take. And I don't think I'm not putting any blame on him. He was here for one movie. He directed one movie. He made an okay film.
I think the direction of the movie is fine.
I think
it's the script that is the weakest
really
part.
Lacking.
And
right.
he was John Singleton was a fan of the first film.
Yes,
he saw the first film. He loved it, and he was very eager to work on that.
Yes.
So, and unfortunately, I know he passed not that long ago, John Singleton.
Yeah, I think it was a few years ago, but.
We can talk about the uniqueness of this movie, and boy, is this movie unique.
Yeah, boy, is it.
What stands out to you in this movie compared to the first one? And then I guess to kind of tie in as well, does this bring anything new? What's new about this movie that brings into this franchise?
Well, I think I kind of spoke on this a little bit already earlier, but I will say, as far as like what it brings, it dips its toes in the pool of the absurd action sequences. Yes. That's the thing, and that's kind of the holdover that we see a recurring theme later on. I think it is the absurd action sequences. It's obviously bringing back Paul Walker, Tyrese Gibson, and Ludacris. They're holdovers. They come back.
The cast, the characters stand out.
The characters stand out. So I think those things really stand out to me. But as far as uniqueness, I guess what makes this film unique to me is that it is, in a way, I think maybe the goofiness. This feels like the goofiest movie in the sense that, you know, again, later movies, there are funny moments in the later movies, as we know. Like Fast 5, there are funny moments, and but it's contained between like Tyrese Gibson and Ludacris. This feels like this entire movie is kind of goofy.
They find a balance in the later ones where they can do things like they're driving Mustangs or whatever on ice.
Yeah.
And it's like such a ridiculous thing, but they find a balance where like it's funny and they can laugh at themselves, but it's also still dramatic enough to be tied into the action and to be on the edge of your seat. I mean, there is a sequence, and you will see it when we get there. I'm not spoiling this for you. There is a sequence in 8 that in any other franchise would not work.
But because it's this.
And it is perfect in this franchise. It is the standout. That is my best scene in 8. I'm telling you right now. And I cannot wait for that. It's goofy for the sake of being goofy. It doesn't find the perfect balance yet.
There's not a lot of drama in this for me. Like the first one, I found there was more drama, and there was a balance of action and drama a lot in that first one. This one, I was missing a lot of the drama. and I was getting more, okay, this is more goofy, and there's some action sequences here and there where it's a little over the top. And there wasn't that balance that I was used to from the first one, or that we're going to get from later ones.
Yeah.
It feels very just like, let's make a goofy car movie, and that's it. And we're going to have an over-the-top villain.
Yeah.
And that's what this is going to be.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, too, what's unique about this movie, and I think 2 and 3 probably share this, so maybe it's not super unique, but that they feel very much like a product of their time.
Yeah.
3 almost mostly because it's supposed to be set later. Like 3, like we mentioned before, is set after 4, 5, and 6. So 3 is supposed to be set in a time period where we see 4, 5, and 6. 3's from 2006.
Yes.
So when they got flip phones and PS2s or whatever in 3, and it's supposed to be set after 4, 5, and 6, it's a little,
It's a little weird.
It's a little weird.
They're just really into retro stuff.
You just ignore it,
Yeah.
But this, from the opening logo sequence.
Yeah.
What'd you think about that logo sequence?
What a sequence. I mean, I was like, what is going on? I thought it was an acid trip. There's just lines and it's moving across the screen. And I'm like,
even
what is going on here?
the Too Fast, Too Furious turning into a tire rim.
Yeah. It's really something.
It's the Universal logo transforms into
the yes.
Yes.
It's very odd and not odd. It's goofy. It's meant to be goofy, and I think that's the uniqueness of this movie. It plays into the goofiness, but in a way, I think it benefits this franchise later on because they implement goofiness more into these movies later on. They find the balance. Yeah. That the first movie did not have a lot of goofiness in it. It wasn't meant to be. It felt
or
more
they played it straight.
Or they played it very straight. It felt more like an action drama, and there's comedy, but it's not really goofy all the way through. This movie is goofy all the way through, and I think later on they look back at this movie and they go, I really like the goofiness of this. Why don't we try to implement this more into these movies?
We'll combine.
We'll balance it, because this works. But it doesn't work as a whole movie. It doesn't work for an hour, 45 minutes. So let's try to just balance that and find the moments where we can do it, but not make the entire movie a goof fest, especially,
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that they do end up doing that later on. This clearly feels like this came out in 2003, and it feels like it came out in 2003.
It feels like 2003.
It really feels like, it's like the most 2003 movie out there.
Absolutely.
So, and then, what's the best scene for you?
Okay, so for me, this was really easy for me because there's a lot of scenes that aren't really memorable. So for me, it was kind of easy to pick this one. I was balancing a little bit. I had a few in mind. Here are my runners up. I'll just give you my quick runners up. I had the opening race as one of them because I really liked the opening race. I had the muscle car race with the two guys we talked about, the New York Mafia guys, the late 50s New York Mafia guys. I had that down as a scene. And I actually I even thought the boat scene, like when he went off the boat and I thought that was interesting. And the other scene I had was, and I'm sure we're going to talk, but the rat scene, which we'll talk about. My personal favorite, the one that really stood out to me, when at the very end not the very end, but they're going away in their escape cars. They drive into those garages. They open the garage and all those cars pull out. I thought that was such a cool shot. I was watching it. I was like, oh, this scene is awesome. All these different colored cars whipping around the parking. Oh, great scene.
I picked that whole sequence. The final, when they have to get into the car with the two henchmen.
Yes.
And just that whole from there to right about the boat scene.
So we have the same scene here.
Basically, because that's
the
included in there,
yes.
And that probably is the standout part. But I love the henchmen warming up to them as they're racing.
Yeah, as they're
You're a good driver, bro.
Yeah, and they're jumping up and they're going, and they're hitting each other, and they're like, this is so much fun. They're just enjoying the ride.
And he's like, you're a good driver. Or when he has to get the weird police technology out of the car, and the guy's like, what are you doing? I can't do that. And he's like, you need to hold the steering wheel. I love that. That's such a fun ride. That is a great climax. Like it's a great action sequence.
It is the best scene in the movie for me. I thought it was the best scene because it works really well. It leads up to a great moment. The cars coming out of the garage, all the different color cars, it works.
The police are chasing what ends up being Ludacris and Suki. You knew it wasn't.
You knew it wasn't them. Of course you knew it wasn't them because you're like, well, why? Because you're saying immediately as soon as they went in that garage, I'm like, okay, now they're going to use the two other cars, obviously, because why would they steal the cars?
The reason why they did that is because they said they needed to win the cars because the other cars are being traced.
Right.
That's why they did that.
Right.
So actually, that was a little clever. Is that like, oh, we only need the cars because we need to drive them so they can't trace where we're going.
Yes.
But then that played into later on. They used it. So that was a little thing that I thought was pretty clever.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, that whole sequence is...
It's a great sequence.
It's a really fun action sequence.
It's a good
And
sequence.
he blows the guy out of the car.
Oh, God. The button and the blood. Yeah, that's... I mean, again, the absurdity of that. Just like hitting the button and literally just... what we see in cartoons happens in real life. He gets blown out the side of the car and you're like... fantastic.
And Brian tries to do it to his guy,
and it's not working.
He doesn't. What's that button do? Like,
what is that? What is that? And he's freaking out. Yeah, it's a great sequence, and it's for me, it's the standout. It works. Like honestly, it works so much for me that like if I had to like rank scenes at the very if we're ranking are the best scenes at the end of this, that might be one of them. Just because it really sets the precedent of what this franchise becomes later. It's an important sequence when you look at it. Yeah.
And we can talk about it. My runner-up is the rat scene.
Yeah. Let's talk about the rat scene.
So, Brian and Roman are with Carter Verone, and he's torturing a cop. By the way, did that cop look familiar?
Yeah, because he's in Batman Begins.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I knew immediately. As soon as I love those movies. You know I love those movies. And I love...
that's what, 2005, right? So it's like right after this.
I believe that's 2005, so it's right after it. And I love those movies. And as soon as I saw him, I was like, that's the guy who gets hung upside down. That's the guy who gets hung upside down. And Batman's yelling at him. That's a great scene. I was like, I recognized him immediately. And I was like, fantastic. He
plays a great, like...
scummy cop.
But he's not a scummy cop in this because...
Yeah,
he does the right thing.
Yes, he is the straight... He kind of does the right thing. He says you have to go pursue them.
I mean,
it pays off.
It's not the right thing for Brian and Roman because he wasn't supposed to do that.
Yes.
But yeah, he does the right thing.
He does the right thing at the end. Yeah, that rat scene is really... It's the most over the top they go with this villain.
We need to torture him. We have a hungry rat.
We have this big hungry rat
on your stomach with a metal bucket over it, and we're gonna heat
it up.
We could torture you with the torch. We could, but we're gonna heat the rat up.
Yeah, we could. There's so many other forms of torture here. We have a blowtorch, and we could just put that against your skin, and that's enough. But instead, we're gonna put this rat in your stomach. Now we're gonna put this metal bucket over the rat, and now we're gonna heat up the metal bucket.
And he's gonna go down.
And if he has nowhere to go, he's gonna go south. And it's just like it's so dumb.
But what? At the same time,
what is enjoyable?
It's kind of scary. Like I was disturbed.
Yeah, it's definitely one of those torture methods where you see it and you walk away after and you go, "Ooh, that is a little like I wouldn't be able to handle that. Like I would not be able to handle a giant rat on my stomach like that at all." So that is definitely one of those things where it's kind of a standout sequence because it makes it. That's the kind of stuff that like mafias do. Like they find those forms of torture, right? And that's like the thing they do. And they were able to implement that in this movie very well. And it showed kind of how dangerous this character is. But at the same time, that's probably the most dangerous we see him get throughout this entire movie. Like you get the sense he's violent, but
it's funny because like there's like the iconic sequences, and to be honest, I haven't really watched that many James Bond movies, but there are iconic sequences from James Bond movies. Like you see parodied so many times of like him strapped to the table with a laser coming up his leg or anything like that. And this felt like one of those, like the Fast and Furious' interpretation of like a James Bond torture sequence.
Yes. But we're going to use a rat and a metal bucket and a blowtorch, and that's how we're going to do it. And he's going to go south. He's going to dig right through your stomach. It's kind of crazy too because even as they're heating it up, when they take the bucket off, the guy's got scratches.
Oh my God.
And you're like, oh geez, you're like, that rat was digging. It started to dig.
It's a rough scene to watch.
It's a bit of. I wouldn't say it's rough.
It's not like gross or anything, but it's just like you're just like, oh, just the thought of it, you're like, oh, that's
it's disgusting more than anything, because you're like, I wouldn't be able to deal with this rat on my stomach, but also the fact that it might be when you kind of put yourself
if you
in it,
think
you go,
about it,
ooh, that would kind of really be uncomfortable.
But the way it's played is such a
it's just so over the top, and he's just yelling. Oh man, it's something. But yeah, I think that's a great runner-up. That's the obvious runner-up.
And then we can talk about connectivity. How does this fit in with the franchise so far? We kind of talked about this again. My opinion is that it's definitely a tone shift from the first one.
Yep.
And you talk about like connectivity. They seem like they're trying to separate themselves from the first movie. They don't have Dominic Toretto.
Yep.
So they don't have Vin Diesel, so they don't even say the word Dominic Toretto. They say that guy in L.A.
Yep.
Which I thought was really interesting. Like, they clearly are trying to completely separate, and they even give Brian a different motivation for why he helped Dom.
Yes.
Because he was substituting Dom for Roman. That's why he helped Dom.
Yes.
Because he felt guilty for what he did, for what happened to Roman or whatever.
Yeah. I think you're right as far as connectivity. To speak on that tone a little bit, it is as much as it is a tone shift, it's also a tone that they implement later into these movies, which is a big thing. They bring that tone back, but also it connects as well. We keep saying, but it's also the cast, you know.
It's the lack of returning characters.
It's the lack of returning characters.
And they do a good job.
It is the distancing of... You're right. It is them trying to distance themselves from the first movie a little bit. Like, look, we're in Miami now. We're not in LA anymore. And we're not even going to say Dom Toretto.
It's a completely different setting with an almost all entirely new cast.
Yes.
They brought back the main character and a side character who's not really ultimately important.
Right.
But he has more to do in this movie, which I thought was
more to
interesting.
do. And I also like how he always has like a vacation shirt on. He's like, my vacation shirt. It's funny.
Yeah, it definitely seemed like they are kind of afraid to be like, hey, you know, we're related to this movie. Like, they are kind of trying to stand out. They haven't yet embraced the franchise itself,
yes.
I think.
I don't even think they were expecting this to be a franchise after this movie. I think they just made a second movie and they didn't know what they were going to do.
And then do you feel that this film alone is worthy a continuation of the franchise? Do you think it fits in well enough? Do you think it's deserving to be in this franchise?
Man, that is such an interesting question. It's a tough question, but honestly, I'm going to say yes. I really do. I think so. When you finish the movie, everyone is still alive. Their records are wiped clean. The world is theirs. So you could continue it. There is that open interpretation.
My opinion is that, so do I feel like that this belongs in this franchise as a sequel to the first one? No, I don't think this is a worthy continuation. I don't think it lives up to what the first one was. Right. I think in the long run, as we go forward, I think it's fine.
Yes,
I think it fits in fine enough. They do a good enough job of kind of retconning around, you know, to fit it into the world. Mm-hmm. So I think ultimately it does, but it's not.
As far as the first one, I think you're right. It's not.
It's not really a worthy continuation of that. It is fun, but you miss Vin Diesel. You really miss his presence.
You miss him so much. I missed him. I missed Michelle Rodriguez, too. I missed Jordana Brewster.
I think when all is said and done and we watched, you know, all 9 and Hobbs and Shaw, we're going to look back at this one going, that was kind of the odd man out. Yeah. Like, not that it's bad, but I think this one will stand out.
Yeah, absolutely. So. You're going to look back on it and go, yeah, this is not the best one, and it's definitely the weirdest one. Because
even though Tokyo Drift, you would think, is the one that connects the least, and I guess in a way it does, but because they have fully embraced and have brought back, and again, I don't know what they do with these characters, but they've brought back, you know, the kind of the story and those characters and tie them into 7, 8, and 9 in different ways. It seems like they've definitely embraced that one more than they have this one. Like, you know, we don't see Carter Verone ever again. You know, we don't see, they don't go to Miami. You know what I mean? They kind of, even Tej and Roman are kind of different characters when we meet them again.
And we only see Eva Mendes one more time.
Yeah, and it's
a post-credit scene.
On-credited cameo and a post-credit scene.
And it's almost like nothing. It's like, why is it even...
Yeah, and again, maybe they'll tie him in the future. And
Will she come back for the finale, do you think?
I don't know.
Does Eva Mendes return for the finale?
That's nothing. We can answer that after 9, I think. But
Yeah,
I don't. Again, I don't want to know that answer because I want to. I want to see 9.
Yep.
But yeah, it's like I said, it's a fun movie, but it is definitely. I think this will be the weakest of the franchise. So far.
Agreed.
So I have, before we touch on everything else, I have some interesting facts and some more casting news.
I love
casting, casting information.
Casting rumors.
Not as many because a lot of this is already set up. But
Right.
Ja Rule, like we talked about, was approached to reprise his role as Edwin from the first film. He turned it down. I believe he's offered about $500,000, which might not seem like much, but if he would have taken it up, he would maybe be in this franchise
he would have doubled
to
the
this
money.
day and end up with making everything back.
Yes.
Instead, since he turned it down, they created the character of Tej, and Ludacris was eventually cast. Redman,
I love Redman.
the rapper,
Yeah.
was considered for the role of Tej,
Yes.
but he couldn't do it due to scheduling conflicts.
He was filming How High.
Maybe. For the role of Roman, apparently they considered 50 Cent.
Ooh. See? Okay. So 2003 50 Cent is great because he has exploded in 2003. Like, this guy is top of the world in 2003. He's the biggest rapper on the planet. I think this is like the year that, in a way, he has surpassed Eminem in his own way. He is like the biggest rapper on the planet in 2003. So I'm really curious how that would have been great. And imagine if he was in this, he would have doubled his money big time.
Yeah.
But would he? I think the thing is too, we were talking about this with Eminem last week. Would he have stayed?
I think he might have because he's had his own issues, but I think those issues would have kind of dragged down this franchise a little bit. Again, I'm not super familiar with him. Obviously I know him as like a pop culture figure, but I haven't looked into his life or really even his career. But I know he's had history with health issues and I think some financial issues. And I think that those would have maybe played a part into this franchise a little bit too much. Mm-hmm. And ultimately I'm happy that I think Tyrese got the role.
Oh no, I'm glad. At the end of the day, I am glad it's Tyrese.
I think that Tyrese plays the role in a more fun way.
Yes.
Whereas I think 50 Cent would play this a little bit more serious, a little bit more... And maybe that's what it needed. Maybe they needed a grounded sensation like a Vin Diesel, in the first one. But I think ultimately, that he would have probably continued to play it that way. And you don't need 2 Vin Diesels when Vin Diesel's already there.
Right.
You need some more ridiculous...
You need comic relief.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's what Tyrese ultimately becomes.
Right.
So, this is an actress I'm not super familiar with, but I know she's done some work.
Sure.
Rosa Blasi from The Grudge, Lesser of the Three Evils. She's done some TV work. She's not a huge name, but she was considered for the role of Monica Fuentes, which obviously ended up going to Eva Mendes.
Yeah, so that's interesting. It sounds like that actress, it was more, I'm not familiar with her either, but that sounds like it was more, she was coming from the horror world more.
Yeah.
And Eva Mendes, 2003, interestingly, I mean, she's coming off of like Training Day.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's actually on the IMDb, is that she played like the wife of like a U.S. Customs agent, and now she is a U.S. Customs agent.
Yes.
So, yeah. I mean, yeah, and she's had, like, she's smaller roles, like, in those movies. She's not the main character in The Grudge. She's like somebody's wife or whatever. Right. But still, I don't know her. I can't really speak on her enough, but I thought it was interesting that
there was another up for it.
Yeah, apparently. Here's the big one, obviously. 2 scripts were written for the film. One featuring Dom Toretto, one not.
In case he said yes.
So,
if we can get him back, here's the script we will use. If not, here's the other one.
Reportedly, Diesel was offered $20 to $25 million to return in 2003. This guy who is really not that big of a name apparently turned down $20 to $25 million to come back.
But we talked about this last week.
And which as a respectful move.
Yeah, he read the script and said no.
Well, he turned it down due to not liking the script and choosing instead to star in the Chronicles of Riddick. So that would be the second Riddick movie. So he'd already done Pitch Black.
The first one was Pitch Black.
So then he came back for that. Diesel has stated, here's a quote, I'm not going to do an impression. They didn't take a Francis Ford Coppola approach to it. They approached it like they did sequels in the 80s and 90s, when they would drum up a new story, unrelated for the most part, and slap the name on it.
Jeez.
So basically, he's thinking, because when I'm hearing this, I'm thinking, Francis Ford Coppola, he's thinking like, Coppola obviously made The Godfather Part 2, which is
Right.
considered to be, I know, shame on me, I've never seen it. It's considered to be possibly the greatest sequel of all time.
One of the greatest movies of all time.
And one of the
too.
greatest movies of all time in its own
Yeah.
right. But also possibly the best sequel of
Yes,
all time, right?
yes.
And we will talk about those movies another time. The Godfather's a franchise.
Yes, it is.
We will talk about it another time. But he's thinking, Coppola came up with a movie that tied into the first one,
Mm-hmm.
but it was also its own thing, but managed to be enough of the first one, and it wasn't a completely different thing. And we talk about this. This one is a completely different thing.
Yes.
And they do it a lot, especially like the Cloverfield movies.
Mm-hmm.
They take those scripts and just slap the name
Yes.
Cloverfield on
Yes.
it. And they're completely unrelated movies. So I guess he was afraid of that, which I understand. Although he has expressed some regret, and in 2014 was reported stating, I would have said, don't walk away from it just because the script sucked. Because there's an obligation to the audience to fight, no matter what, to make that film as good as possible. I might have had a little bit more patience or belief in the long term of it.
Yeah.
So it seems like he kind of regrets not doing
no.
it,
Yeah.
because he thinks that maybe he could have made it a better movie.
I mean, quite honestly, after his performance in the first one, he probably could have. His performance was so good in that first one that his presence in the second one, and that's what we keep saying. We're like, you miss his presence in this movie. It would have been better with him. Absolutely.
Yeah.
There's no doubt in my mind. There's no doubt that if he was in this movie, I would rank this higher and say this is a better movie because he's in it.
Yeah, no, it makes sense.
Yeah.
Some other random fun facts, and then we'll talk about the future of the franchise.
Sure.
Obviously, like I mentioned, John Singleton was a fan of the first film and excitedly took the opportunity to direct this film. Last week, one of the questions we have coming up is that, who's a franchise star you would like to add to this series, right?
Sure.
Last week, we mentioned a name. We mentioned Sylvester Stallone, okay? Sylvester Stallone does have a weird attachment to the Fast and Furious franchise because Carter Verone's mansion in this movie was filmed in a house that was, I don't know if it was at the time, but at one point, owned by Sylvester Stallone.
Incredible. That's incredible. Awesome.
So, at one point, Too Fast, Too Furious, I believe at the end, the sequence we mentioned with the boat and everything like that, was filmed on one side of Cape Florida State Park, while on the other side of that state park, Bad Boys 2 was filming.
Wow, that's really interesting. Oh, that's wild. That's so cool.
This is just something I recognize, because Tom Barry, who plays Agent Bilkins, seemed familiar to me. He plays Michael Jordan's father in Space Jam.
Oh, wow. Awesome.
So-
I know. I didn't even pick up on that. That's really cool.
So much neon was used in the cars that a specialist in shooting neon on film was kept on set at all times.
Oh, man. If that doesn't scream excess, I don't know what does.
That screams 2003
It
to
screams
me.
2003.
John Singleton encouraged ad-libbing in the film, and he's credited a lot of the humor to the film to being ad-libs from the cast.
Nice.
I imagine Tyrese eating all the food feels like very much on
That was
the
his
moment.
choice.
I noticed this. I don't know if you noticed this. Green screen can be seen in the background near the end of the first race. So when Brian crashes his car in the first race, outside his window is very clearly a green screen. And I wrote it off at first going, maybe there's a neon light or
right.
something reflecting. No, it's a green screen.
I didn't notice that, but I'm going to go back and look at it now.
Jeff Calentano, who directed movies such as Gun Shy, Primary Suspect, Moscow Heat, Say It in Russian, Breaking Point, movies I've never heard of, and a guy I never heard of, was considered to be the director, and his rejected take on the film would have set the story in Japan.
Oh, that's interesting.
So, obviously, we go to Japan in the next movie.
We do. We go to Japan in the next one. But
he wanted to go here now.
Wow, interesting. That's really curious.
Yeah. And the last, John Singleton credited Top Gun as an influence.
Makes sense. That makes sense.
And we can talk a little bit as well. The turbocharged prologue for Too Fast, Too Furious is a 6-minute short film that depicts Brian O'Connor's escape from LA and his relocation to Miami. I didn't know this existed until I looked this up. We both did watch it. It's 6 minutes long. There's no dialogue.
Yep.
It's Paul Walker and an early role from Minka Kelly.
Yep.
And
just driving and
it's
racing.
him driving and showing. It's not super well done, but I do like this idea that they do show you how he got there, because it is a little jarring that he's just there and on the complete other side of the country, and like you don't know they don't tell you right away that he's not a cop. Like, you don't know that he kind of gave up being a cop, so they show him hanging his badge, and
Yes.
not much really to say about it, but I thought it was interesting.
Yeah, there's not a lot to say about it. I mean, it's a quick 6 minutes. It's just him driving. It's him racing. It goes by really quickly. Early role from Minka Kelly, like you said. My favorite part is the very beginning where he's in the bathroom and he's leaning on the sink, and then in the bathroom mirror, I owe you a 10-second card. That's my favorite, because it's literally just plastered on there, and I'm like, Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
That's my favorite. But then otherwise, it literally is him just racing, driving across the country, escaping the cops, I'm imagining, running from the cops, and racing and making money racing, and that's really what it is. That's the entire short film. Like, it's not anything else different. And yeah, I mean, that's really what it is. But yeah, no, it's an interesting little short film. I encourage people to seek it out if you're just interested.
It's on YouTube. It's
YouTube,
6 minutes.
It's easy.
But it is interesting because the Fast and Furious franchise, and like I mentioned, this does do this. There is another short film that we'll talk about in a couple weeks for Fast and Furious that they use this to kind of fill in a little bit of gaps and explain, here's what happened in between movies. And I think that's clever. And I kind of wish more movies did something like that.
Yeah, it's not a bad thing to do.
Because clearly this had no budget.
Yes.
It's just Paul. They got Paul Walker. He probably grabbed them right before he filmed. You know, he had him driving around in the car. You know, they don't really have any defining characteristics of any of these states he's visiting.
Yep.
So it could be shot anywhere.
It's probably shot right in L.A.
Yeah, I would imagine.
It's probably shot right in L.A. And the thing that was curious too is it's not directed by John Singleton either.
No.
Singleton was not. It's a completely just different director. It's not even Singleton who directs it. It's just a different director.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it's a fun. I do agree with you that it's interesting just to see how he got there. And maybe more movies should do it. You know, maybe more movies should do it, especially if you're making such a jarring change.
Well, that's if this movie picks up and showed his transition, or showed, you know, maybe still set in LA or whatever, it'd be a little different, because there is a complete change.
Right.
He no longer has his job. He's in a different location. He's doing something completely different. That I like that it just connects it a little bit. Yeah. And like I said, it's not super well done. It was made for a shoestring budget. You can tell there's nothing there.
There's nothing there.
But
it's very easy.
And maybe it was the version I watched, but it's kind of hard to see. And
it's a little blurry.
I looked at different versions, and they don't look any better.
Yeah, I don't think it's not very well shot, but you know, it's interesting.
Yeah.
You know, seek it out if you're interested.
So, and then we can talk about the future of the franchise.
Yes.
I'm interested in hearing your answer. Based off this movie alone, Too Fast, Too Furious, should there be a sequel to this?
Based off of this one alone, no.
Yeah.
Based off this one alone,
no.
They
are lucky this franchise did not die.
Lucky. They're lucky it didn't die with this movie. Absolutely not. Like, if I walked out, if it was 2003 and we saw this movie and walked out, I would have looked at you and said, I hope they don't make another one of these, because that was bad. You know? And no, based off this, no.
Yeah, and then what do you want to see in the future? But if they said, "Hey, we are going to make a movie," what do you want? What would they have to do to win you over?
Tone down the goofiness. That's the big. I mean, that's our biggest complaint, is that maybe it is not complaint, but because it is so goofy, I would say tone down the goofiness, and they start to do it, but invest more in the absurd action sequences.
I would say they definitely need to, or they should have. It's hard to answer these questions because we're doing this in hindsight. We know what they ended up doing. We know what the third one is.
Yes.
But for a third one in our fictionalized version of this, I say you got to bring back Dom Toretto.
Yeah.
Yes. You go to you crawl to Vin Diesel and you say, I don't care what you want. You need to come back to this.
Crawl to Vin Diesel and you say, please, for the love of God, come back.
And I think not only do you need Vin Diesel, but I think you need to add more stars.
Yes, you need more stars.
So, and if they were, who would you add to this? So this is 2003. The third one came out in 2006.
Yeah.
So who would you pick? I know you picked last week. You picked Harrison Ford.
Yeah.
He's not doing it at this point.
He's done.
He sees this movie. I'm out. I'm not doing this.
He definitely wouldn't pick up this script. I really thought about this a lot, and I was trying to think, like, 2003. Who's big in 2003 and needs that break? You know, who can pop up in this movie? And I struggle a little bit, because I'm like, who could make this? I also go to the place of who would make this a little bit better. Mm-hmm. Like, what actor or actress could step in and make this better. it's a tough gamble. It can't be Will Smith because he's filming Bad Boys 2 right over. He's filming Bad Boys 2, as we know. It can't be Will Smith. Jeez, I really.
So I have an answer.
If you have a name, give me that. I really don't have.
I
one.
have two. Okay, and they may be controversial picks.
Oh boy.
One is not a big name,
Okay.
and one is, or at the time. So
At the time isn't big,
so I'm thinking 2006.
But will grow.
And one is a big name, and it's interesting because I don't know how they would transition, but
Sure.
they would catch my attention for this. And so one would be more. The first one would be more of a supporting.
Okay.
And the other would be like you could bring him in as like a main character.
Okay, tell me the first supporting one who. Yeah.
And this is an actor who ended up, ironically enough, joining the franchise later. But I would bring in a 2006 John Cena.
Interesting.
They have a history of hiring rappers. I say bringing John Cena in. Right. Who would I add to this?
Okay.
I'm thinking 2006 John Cena.
Which is wild because you're right. He's obviously in F9. He joins the cast in F9. That's interesting. Where is Cena at in his WWE career in 2006? Is this when he's just blowing up?
No, he's already blown up.
Okay.
He is just about to get the
championship,
kind of the
WWE.
No, he's got it.
He's got it. Oh my god! So he's big.
I think he's not yet at the point of hatred.
Right.
But it's
people still like him.
He's still popular, and obviously that he's going back. Like he went to become such a polarizing figure. Where
I know 2006 John Cena. He's very popular still in 2006. Like he's not hated
he's still,
at all.
Yeah.
Like he is still very much a big name. Because he won the championship in what, 5 or 6?
He won it in 5.
He won it in 5. So yeah, he's still a very big deal in 2006. That makes sense. I think that's a great pick. I think that's a very great pick.
And obviously,
that's a supporting role.
I think you bring him in as like a thug or something.
Sure.
Obviously, it works that he's a bigger star now, and he can be a bigger character later on.
Sure.
You don't bring him in as Vin Diesel's brother in 2006.
Right.
But in our fictionalized kind of version of these movies,
right,
I think he might fit. And the other one is an actor who, at the time, I looked at his filmography. It looked like in 2006, he was still caring. So I would bring in Bruce Willis.
Wow. Yeah, okay.
He hadn't given up yet. I Googled when did Bruce Willis give up, and I think the general consensus is around 08, 09. So he hadn't given up yet.
And I think 06, funny enough,
he had a really busy year in 06.
I'm pretty sure that's the Live Free or Die Hard. I think that's the 4th Die Hard movie, which did well. And I saw that movie, and I really liked that movie. And that's probably the last one before he gave up that he did. Bruce Willis. Yeah, that's a great choice. Bruce Willis is definitely a hell of a choice.
I wouldn't want to see Bruce Willis now. So here's what he did
in 2006. What's that filmography?
It's a very big year. Alpha Dog, Lucky Number 11, 16 Blocks, Over the Hedge, Fast Food Nation, The Astronaut Farmer, Hammy's Boomerang Adventure, and The Hip Hop Project. Wow. So he doesn't do Live Free or Die Hard to 2007.
Which is right before he gave up.
Yeah.
Right before Bruce Willis gave up. Okay, so that's really interesting.
It's a bunch of like little cameos and voice acting.
It's cameos, voice acting. That's fascinating. Lucky Number 11. Yeah, okay. So that's a really good choice because imagine if he joins the franchise in 3, he's a great addition to the cast.
Yeah.
And he's kind of at that point, too, where he's revitalizing Die Hard again.
Yeah.
Those are 2 big back-to-back years for him.
I think you could bring him in. You could bring him in as a hero or a villain. He works either way, I think.
He works either way because he can do both. And I think it's a great choice. And this is, you're right. That's Bruce Willis is still very active. So because I like that choice a lot.
I'm thinking like at this point, this is like if they greenlit 3, 2 made money, but it's clear it was not a big critical success.
Right.
Even the audience didn't love it. Right.
Yeah.
What do we need to do? We got the up and coming star in John Cena. We got the current star in Vin Diesel, and we got the veteran in Bruce Willis.
Yes.
And that's my pitch for that because you need to do something completely different to get it. And they do something completely different, and they go in a completely different manner.
Yes.
And I think in its own way, somehow it does work.
Yes.
So it's hard to pitch that. What would like this fictional version of this movie be? But I think you got to get some star power in there and try to just
and especially if you already like we said. So let's say in another universe, Harrison Ford did star in one of these. When you lose him, it's kind of like you're gonna feel that loss and go, "Wow, they lost Harrison Ford." Like I was so attached to this movie. You need to bring that other big star power in. You're like, who do we go to? Oh, let's go to another big action star, veteran action star. We get Bruce Willis. That's the guy. You get Bruce Willis in there, and Bruce Willis will bring. And this is before he gave up. And he really, we're just going to keep hammering that home. This is before Bruce Willis gave up. He's had moments, though. I don't think he gave up. He had moments.
I think the agreement, again, is that the year 2013, 12 or 13, whenever Looper came out, that year is considered to be like the one time he tried. Because like Looper, he actually does a really good job.
I would actually argue Moonrise Kingdom.
That's the same year.
Oh, that's the same year. So Looper and Moonrise, yeah.
So that people are like, okay, he's actually trying different things in that year.
Yeah.
And then other than that, he's coasting.
He's kind of coasting.
We talked about it before. Like, he gets like $1 million a day for one day of shooting. His movies, he's really not in them very well.
It's kind of cameo, if anything. Yeah. It's very small roles. Yeah, I understand that. Sure.
So I wouldn't want to see him in one of these now. But I think back in the time, around 2006, I think he fits.
Yeah, he would fit right in. You're right.
So now we have 2 movies.
Yep.
We can rank these movies so far.
Sure.
This is very easy.
1 and 2.
1 is 1, and 2 is 2.
2 is 2. That's what this is right now.
The Fast and the Furious is ranked 1.
Yep.
Too Fast, Too Furious is ranked 2.
Yeah, that's the obvious choice.
And we're going to watch Too Fast, Too Furious start to go down a little bit.
We're going to watch it drop. In my case, most likely to the bottom. So
I agree. And like I said, I did not hate this movie. I had a blast. I had a blast. Maybe not a blast, but I had a really good time.
Well, that's the thing with this. As you're ranking a franchise, even if a movie is last between all the other movies, it doesn't mean it's a bad movie necessarily in all cases. Not every time does it mean it's a bad movie. It just means if we put this movie... If you're asking me, do you want to watch Too Fast, Too Furious or Fast 5? I'm going to watch Fast 5 every single time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, of course you're going to watch... Like, it doesn't match up to the other movies. That's really what this is about. It just doesn't... It's not there. Yeah. That's all it is.
Yeah, absolutely. And we, to look into the future, they obviously take a different direction. When they go to the third one, they do Fast and the Furious Tokyo Drift. Mm-hmm. They look into kind of distancing themselves from the first 2. Mm-hmm. They want to go to like a high school type of, they go to younger actors and kind of try and hit like a teenage demographic kind of.
Right.
And we'll talk about that more next week. Mm-hmm. But one of the things I do want to mention is that, so as you mentioned, they do bring in Justin Lin, who I give a lot of credit to, or I imagine we end up to revitalizing this franchise as a whole. But one of the things he does, and I only mention this because I'm going to watch this for next week. You don't have to, but I do suggest this, is that Justin Lin at the time is coming off a film called Better Luck Tomorrow.
Okay. And
the producer of the Fast and Furious movies sees Better Luck Tomorrow and is a fan of it. So he contacts Justin Lin and sees if he's interested in directing the third Fast and Furious movie. He comes in, but Justin Lin doesn't come in by himself.
Yeah.
He brings in the actor Sung Kang, who starred in Better Luck Tomorrow as a character named Han.
Yes. So he plays Han twice?
He brought over the character of Han into it's not just it's the exact character into Fast and Furious Tokyo Drift, making Better Luck Tomorrow a slight spin-off of the Fast and Furious franchise.
That is wild.
While it is not considered technically a part of the franchise, a lot of the fans consider it to be Han's backstory for this series.
Wow.
So I'm watching Better Luck Tomorrow this week.
I might have to watch that.
And I would suggest that as well.
Yeah, I think so. I think that is okay.
It has nothing to do with cars. It's nothing to do with it's just
a completely different movie that gives you some background.
And he's not even the main character. He's like a supporting character in it. But I guess he connected with that actor and that character so much. He said he thought that he fit into this world, so he brought him over. And it's so weird that because not only is Han in this movie, but Han's in 4, he's in 5, he's in 6, he's in 9. He becomes such an integral part of this franchise. And he came from this completely other movie that a general audience has no idea about.
That's unbelievable. That is unbelievable. Wow. That's awesome. I'm gonna watch this. Better Luck
It's
Tomorrow.
on Amazon,
It's
so
on
I'm going to
Amazon
check that
Prime.
out.
Okay.
And we
Better
can
Luck
discuss
Tomorrow.
that as well. And just thought that was so interesting that like not only like you don't usually see like or if you look at fan theories, there are fan theories that certain actors are playing characters they've done before in other films. Like
Right.
there is a fan theory that in the Michael Bay movie The Rock, Sean Connery is playing James Bond. And obviously they don't have the rights to James Bond,
Right.
but he is a British intelligence operative who was arrested, played by Sean Connery.
Right.
So they don't ever call him James Bond, but the belief is that he is James Bond,
Right.
caught by the Americans and trapped in this, prison or whatever,
Sure.
right? This isn't a fan theory. This is the exact character confirmed by the director to just connect over.
To just come right
He
over.
has the full name, his first and last name.
Wow.
So same characteristics from what I understand. It's
That's
very
wild.
It's very
okay,
interesting.
Yeah, Better Luck Tomorrow. We're adding it to the
So-
watch list this week, along with Fast and
and
Furious,
Furious,
Tokyo
Tokyo
Drift.
Is there anything else from this movie that stood out to you that you wanted to mention? Any other sequences or things?
I think I touched on all the sequences I wanted to touch on. Again, this that's the thing with this movie. There aren't a lot of memorable ones. We touched on all of the memorable ones. So to me, I really don't have anything. I think I touched on everything I wanted to touch on.
The only other scene that really stood out to me because it makes me really uncomfortable is the stare and drive scene where he's driving the car with Eva Mendes.
And he's just staring.
And she's like, you need to keep your eyes on the road or whatever.
and he
just
presses the gas more. You're like, what are you doing? Yeah, no, I agree. That's
I've
uncomfortable.
I've developed a phobia of when I'm watching movies
Mm-hmm.
and characters are driving a car and you can kind of tell they're lingering on the shot of the car a little bit too far and
Sure.
they start getting a little distracted and I start wincing
they're gonna
'cause
crash.
they're gonna crash and
This is gonna turn into a horror so quick.
and it's happened in so many movies for whatever reason I've recently watched
Mm-hmm.
in things that I didn't expect. Like I watched Remember the Titans and
Yes.
this guy's driving away and all of a sudden in the middle of this inspiring football movie the kid crashes his car.
Yes.
Like where's that come from?
Like why?
So when he's doing that I'm like, oh, it was so uncomfortable the entire time.
I agree. That's a good scene. That's it.
It was such a weird scene. But overall, it's not the best movie. It's fun. I'm looking forward to moving on from this.
Yes.
This we mentioned last week. This is kind of the one that we were like, and we texted during the week going, I don't want to watch Too Fast, Too Furious.
Yeah, we were struggling this week. We were like, oh god.
Like I said, if this is the worst that it gets, that's pretty great.
I can sit through the other ones.
Yeah,
for sure.
I'm excited to go to Tokyo Drift and then go into 4, but I'm really excited for 4 on and to see where this goes and everything.
I have not seen 5 since we've seen it in the theaters, which is why I'm really excited to watch it again because.
If you enjoyed it then,
we're
to
not-
have context
I'm not
of
going
all
to.
this.
I'm not going to talk about it too much now. But when we get to Fast 5, we have to talk about our theater experience with that movie. Oh man, I can't wait. When we get to the Fast 5 episode, we will talk about
Absolutely. Yeah, it's just to see that, I've seen these movies, and we talked about this before, that I think that with this franchise, they do a good job of, if you go into these movies and you don't see the other ones, you can still enjoy it.
Yeah,
we went into
absolutely.
Fast 5 completely cold. We went to go see another movie, couldn't get in. We went and saw Fast 5 because The Rock was in it, right? And we're completely sold. Didn't
Yes.
need to know anything. They kind of fill you into everything. But to have this background and to go in and to see returning characters or, plot points and to see how they really tie everything in. And to see, again, unfortunately, to see this beautiful send-off for this actor that we are going to really become attached. I'm already becoming attached to through these 2 movies. I expect to be emotionally touched and affected.
Yeah, with 7, that's gonna be
going
tough.
into 7.
Yeah,
and I'm excited to really. I've been really connecting to these movies so far. They're fun.
Yeah,
and they're not. Again, they're not Shakespeare. It's not a Scorsese film, but it's a good time.
Right. It's and that's what it's meant to be. It's meant to be a good time, and it's going to be really interesting to watch this franchise grow. Because now I think now I'm excited for Tokyo Drift. I've never seen it, so I'm excited for this one. I think now that we've gotten through the second one, we are only going to go up from here.
Yeah.
It's going to get better and better each week.
And what I think is interesting about Tokyo Drift is it's kind of renowned as some of the better driving because of the technique.
Yes.
Because of the technique. And again, I'll talk about that going into next week. They really wanted this to kind of stand out while making that. So I am excited to see those sequences, those race scenes and everything. So, all right, that'll bring us to an end. Thank you for listening. Thank you to Tony, as always.
Thank you, Tony.
You can share your thoughts with us on Twitter at FranchiseMePod, and you can email us at franchisemepod@gmail.com. And join us next week as we continue the Fast and Furious franchise as we discuss Fast and Furious Tokyo Drift.
See you next week.
Woo!